the narrative that somehow or other climate change is producing the sixth great extinction in the history of the world is probably, again, just a piece of climate alarmism and is untrue.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. And Hugo, Bill Gates this week shifted his thinking, his public stance about climate change. What did he signal about his thinking, and why is that so significant?
It's very significant. He wrote an essay on his website, Gates Notes, in which he essentially reversed what he's been saying for the past 20 years, where he has been one of the leading proponents, and because he's very wealthy, one of the most influential proponents of climate alarmism. And he wrote just in the last several days that actually climate change is not going to cause the demise of humanity. And he emphasized the need not to take measures that are dictated by climate alarmism and to be much more measured about the things that are done. For example, he said that economic progress, which involves the use of energy, is what actually improves and saves human lives. He acknowledged what a lot of people, including the Washington Examiner and conservative writers, have been saying for a generation at least, which is that deaths from natural disasters such as floods, etc., which are caused by climate anomalies, have actually declined by 90% in the past century. And I think that this is just part of the truth. Eventually comes out, and you can't sustain a false narrative forever. And what we're seeing at the moment is the truth about climate alarmism being unnecessary coming out.
Part of what Gates seemingly acknowledged is that the goals of the climate change movement can sometimes, in some very tangible ways, conflict with the other broader goals of the left, like, for instance, helping poor people,
yes.
Which, a lot of this climate stuff, environmental justice, for example, was packaged as being part of the social justice thing. If you sort of acknowledge that those two things are actually in conflict with one another, does that kind of undermine the entire left climate project?
Well, it does. It undermines it to the extent of it shows up what is really problematic and damaging about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's actually a few years now since I wrote about a study which found that 400,000 Africans a year die because of breathing particulates, which are caused by charcoal and animal dung fires because they don't have proper electricity. The reason they don't have proper electricity is that climate alarmism, which has seeped into international finance organizations, means that they haven't been able to raise money on affordable terms to build coal-fired power stations to generate electricity. So the poor people of the world are the ones who have suffered most by the climate alarmism of the left.
It's not just Gates who is sort of conceptually moving away from this, but you mentioned to me earlier a study that also undermines the narrative that climate change is driving extinctions, right?
Yes. There was a very interesting study that came out of the University of Arizona, again, just in the last few days, which said that over the course of the past 100 years, extinctions have been declining, which of course kind of contradicts the narrative that climate change is getting worse and accelerating and extinctions are getting worse. People talk about the sixth great extinction, but actually extinctions have been declining. Extinctions in the last 500 years have been driven primarily, at least for the first 400 of those 500 years, by the fact that human beings travel, and there is a lot of trade that has developed. The economic growth of peoples all over the world has meant that there are invasive species that arrive in alien areas, and those species wipe out other species, both plant and animal. In the last 100 years, it's been much more about the loss of habitat, which is not because of climate change, it's because of human expansion into those areas. So the narrative that somehow or other climate change is producing the sixth great extinction in the history of the world is probably, again, just a piece of climate alarmism and is untrue.
You mentioned earlier that you see this as a sort of inevitable unraveling of something that was a falsehood to begin with. But is there a risk that this is just another sort of tech industry leader positioning himself to navigate through, a business-friendly but unpredictable Trump presidency, and we'll see a reversion after Trump is gone?
Well, there's always that danger. I think that climate alarmism is, as I said, it's in retreat because you can't build a wall that is absolutely impregnable to the truth, and the truth gets through. But I think one of the things that both the Bill Gates 180-degree turn and other things like that is produced is, a lot of people, are delighted that, and it's a good thing, of course, that he has come around to reality. But there's also a sense of frustration, which is that he has been talking on a subject about which he doesn't know enough for the past 20 years. And there's a lot of frustration amongst those people who do know a great deal more about it, that for 20 years, he, and for a much longer period, others, have been insisting on something which was, broadly speaking, untrue. And just for example, one of the social and cultural damage is done by that. Just for example, children for decades have been scared into thinking that the planet is in danger, that humanity is not going to survive. So instead of growing up delighting in the animal world, they've grown up thinking that it's going to go away and that we're, that humanity is a danger to it. There are people who, back in the 50s, so a long time ago, there were many people who thought it was unwise to bring children into the world at all because of the atomic bomb, and that nuclear war was going to destroy humanity. There are young adults now who don't want to bring children into the world because they think what a ghastly world they're bringing children into because of climate change and the disasters that are going to flow. The problem that it's great that people should come around to reality, but really you would want them to be looking at the evidence solidly and with a sort of in a measured way, so that we don't have these extraordinary freakouts, which then are shown to be unnecessary.
Well, Hugo, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more from Hugo and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.